Nedarim Daf discusses three shilas the Gemara has and tries to bring proofs to each of them from our most recent Mishnah. The three shilas are going to be whether a kohen, when he's bringing in carbon, is considered to be a shliach of the owner of the carbon to properly bring it and execute it, or is he a shliach of Shemayim to put the carbon correctly on the Mizbeach. The second shilah will be, is somebody allowed to take truma from his own produce on someone else's produce without telling him? And the third shilah also involves truma, and that's the question of if somebody takes truma for someone else, who gets the right to decide who to give the truma to? So let's discuss the first shilah. The Gemara is already in the middle of this. Is a kohen a shliach of the owner of the karbanos, or is he a shliach of Shemayim? And afkamina is, if it is also for the owner of the karbanos to have hana from this kohen, is he allowed to execute the carbon for him? If he's his shliach, then he can't. If he's a shliach of Shemayim, then he can. So the Gemara now brings a proof of Rav Simi bar Abba, who he has a brisa that says that if a kohen is usher to give hana to someone, he's still allowed to put the blood of his carbon chatas or carbon asham on the mizbeach. So the question is how you allow to do that. We've discussed in our Mishnah different types of karbanos, which we said are just called mechusar kapara, and therefore there's no real hana here. But these, a chatas and an asham, are not mechusar kapara. They are a real carbon a person needs to bring in order to get what he's required to fulfill his chiyuv. So how's a kohen who he's also to have an offer allowed to do that for him? So the Gemara answers, we're not talking about regular karbanos, we're talking about a chatas and an asham of a mitzora. That is also just like mechusar kapar. That's also something that you don't have to be a shliach at all in order to do. That's something you can do without the knowledge of the person at all. And we see that because you can even do that for a katan, as we have a drasha where it says zos tia Torah and mitzora. That phrase zos tia is always to include an extra situation. That includes you can even do that for a mitzora katan. And obviously he doesn't need to have the knowledge, the das, understanding, and the shlichus that the kohen is doing it for him, because the katan doesn't have das. Okay, now the Gemara goes to another proof. This is from somewhere else. So the Gemara brings a Mishnah that says that if a kohen does pigul, that is, he brings a carbon and he performs one of the ki avodas with the intention that he's going to do another one in the wrong time or the wrong place, that passes the carbon, the food becomes an iser kares, and he has to bring the person who brought the carbon has to bring another one. And the question then is, the kohen obligated to pay him for the carbon that he messed up? So if he did it b'mezid on purpose, he has to pay him. If he didn't do it on purpose, he did it by accident, he doesn't have to pay him, but the carbon is still puzzled. So the Gemara's question is, why is the carbon puzzled? The kohen, if he's a messenger of the makriv, he should be, then the owner of the carbon should be able to say to him, I made you my messenger to do the right thing, not to do the wrong thing. Anything you did which you did that's wrong doesn't count for me, and therefore there is no pigul on this. It's an expression we have in Hilchos Shlichos, I sent you to do things which help me and not which hurt me. Now, as far as the halacha that he can make a carbon pigul if he has pigul in mind b'mezid on purpose, that's not a kasha, and they're not explained. From there we don't ask, because he could have made it his own carbon by doing it b'mezid, and therefore it's his own rights. He's no longer acting as the messenger anymore, and it becomes pigul because he took control over it. But if it's b'shogeg, he didn't do that. He's not taking control over it, and therefore the question remains as to why can't the mishaleach, why can't the owner say that you're not my shliach for that? Obviously, then he must not be his shliach at all. So the Gemara says this is not a proof. And the reason is that there's a special exeris custom in Hilchos Pigul that any type of pigul passes and applies, even if he could have theoretically said, I didn't make you a messenger to be mefagal the carbon for me. Still, it says lo yichashiv lo, it's canceled and it's not valid in any circumstance. Now the Gemara refers to a previous step we had in this discussion. We had a Josh that Rav Yochanan said that in mechusar kapara, where you're just bringing a carbon in order to finish off somebody's tahara process, there is no requirement of the owner having knowledge and appointing a shliach, and a person can even bring it for his children or for his wife, even in a situation where his wife is not functional, if she's a shota, and he can bring it for her anyway. The Gemara's question is, that drasha should also apply for a carbon chatos. Let's say she ate chelif and is bringing a carbon chatos for her. So why do we limit it to a mechusar kapar? The drasha where we said that he's responsible for her and he accepts all responsibilities for her, and therefore he could bring a carbon for her, that should also apply if she's obligated to bring a carbon chatos. And therefore we should be able to bring a proof that there is no shlichus, because he's bringing carbon chatas for her. He's bringing her chatas for her. As it is, her obligations are his obligations. So if she is obligated to bring a chatas, that comes from him. So Gemara answers, there is no circumstance in which she can bring a korban chatas if she's a shota. Because when did she become a shota? If she became a shota before she ate chaylev, which was what created the obligation to bring the chatas, then there is no obligation to bring the chatas because she's a shota. She's not chayven mitzvos at all. Now, if she ate it while she was still functional, and therefore she became chayv to bring the korban then. Now, the Gemara doesn't say this, but were she then to not ever get around to separating the korban and becomes a shota right away, she wouldn't have to bring a korban either, because again, she has no obligation to bring anything because she became a shota. What the Gemara says is if they actually set aside the korban, so now it has to be brought, then she becomes a shota afterwards, so in that situation, still you can't bring it, because the fact that the owner is a shota makes korban puzzle. Even if she then becomes functional again, that korban is not usable. Because it was a time in which it couldn't be brought, it remains unbringable. It doesn't return. We have an expression, we have a rule in Mesachas Tzmura of Hov and Nidche Yidche. Once it was already unusable, it remains unusable, even if the circumstance that made it originally unusable expires. Now, that's another kasha. Then he should be able to bring a korban pesach for his wife, even if she's a shota. The Gemara wants to know, how come we have a rule which is brought that one cannot bring a korban chatas for someone else unless he or she is included in the group in the first place. But we have a rule that somebody can bring a korban chatas for his banav or for his children if they are kitanim. So why then do we have a rule that someone who brings a korban for someone else didn't do anything for him unless that person had knowledge of it? If we have a drasha and if you see from the fact that a person can bring a korban pesach or any other korban for that matter for his wife as a shota or for his children without their understanding, because they don't have understanding, and that proves that he should therefore be able to bring it for other people as well. So then in case of korban pesach also should be able to bring it for other people as well without their understanding. So the Gemara answers the halacha that a person cannot bring a korban pesach for someone else without their knowledge. That is a dirabanan halacha, even though it says labayis, where you have to be included in it. That's a dirabanan. It's actually not a halacha d'oraisa, and you can see that from the fact that it says that if there was a case, there's a mishnah and a brisa which discuss where somebody wanted to encourage his children to be quick about coming to Yerushalayim for Aliyah l'Regal. So he said, whoever's going to come first, I'm including him in my korban. Now when it comes afterwards, they're not included. So the first one to come, and he's head and shoulders within, he's head and majority within, he is kona the korban right away. He fulfills the Tanai first, and then he can actually be mazaket his other brothers as well. And the Gemara's question is, first of all, how did he get any rights to the korban if at the time that he came, it was already slaughtered? So that's not such a kasha, the Ran says, because it could be that you say breira, you say the father had in mind which everyone's going to come first, and that is him. You just didn't know it was him until he actually came first. But he had in mind for him all along because he's the one who ended up coming first. However, how could he then be mazaka others? That's a decision that he made later, and the korban was already slaughtered. So obviously it's got to be that that's only halacha dirabanan, and therefore in a situation like this, he's allowed to be mazaka if he wants to, and it works. The Gemara says you can see this as well, that the only intent that we had here was to be mizaris and to come faster. So Brisa quotes that the story actually happened, and it was the daughters who came first, and the comment on that was you see that the girls have more zrizas than the boys. Gemara now moves on to its second shaila, and that is if somebody takes truma for someone else from his own produce, that is, Ruvain wants to take truma from Ruvain's produce to be mitaking Shimon's produce, and the question is, does he have to inform Shimon that he did that, and Shimon has to agree, or could he do it even without Shimon's knowledge, without Shimon's consent, and then later say that, hey, I did this for you, and it works? What are the two sides of the question? On the one hand, it is a schus, he's saving money for Shimon, so maybe we say Zachan Shalom Shled B'fanav. On the other hand, maybe Shimon wanted to do his own truma himself, maybe he considered it a mitzvah, it is a mitzvah, maybe he considered it a privilege, and he didn't want somebody to do it for him, and he didn't want somebody to go be attacking his things for him, and then we can't do the mitzvah. That's a question. So Mara wants to try to resolve this from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah had said that if Ruvain is usher, it's usher for Shimon to have enough from Ruvain, it's an usher enough from Ruvain to Shimon, Ruvain is still allowed to take truma for him. So the Gemara's question is, what's the circumstance over here? Who's taking truma? The truma that Reuven's taking for Shimon is from his own property or for Shimon's property, and was it with Shimon's knowledge or without Shimon's knowledge? So the Gemara says it most certainly has to be that it's without the knowledge of Shimon, without the knowledge of the owner of the produce that's being metoken. Because if he knows and he's indicating to him that he wants it, so that it's most clearly hana. So obviously it's without his knowledge. Now the question is, okay, so it's talking about without the knowledge of Shimon. Is it Shimon's property being used or Reuven's property being used? No, it can't be Shimon's property being used because you can't take somebody else's truma for him without him knowing. That's clear halacha. So it's got to be that it's Reuven's property with Reuven's knowledge, not with Shimon's knowledge. We're talking Shimon's things. And there is exactly our case. Now, do we say that it's considered to be a zechus for him automatically and it's with him knowing about it? Does he have to inform him? It's not a zechus automatically? So if you say that he has to inform him, it's not a zechus automatically, then by informing him, he now makes it hanal, because that person has to agree and be aware of it. Obviously, then we're saying that he can do it without him knowing about it, and he considers it zechus b'fanav, and therefore it's not a no, that's the only circumstance that it could be. So therefore, you have an answer to our question that he doesn't have to inform him and it's considered to be his chus. So Gemara rejects this, and Gemara says, no, it could be that he actually said he wants it. You had a kasha that it's hana. The answer is he didn't tell him to do it. Shimon didn't tell Reuven to do it. Shimon made an announcement, whoever wants to grab it could come and take truma from me. I let. So therefore, there were many other people who were interested in doing that as well. The fact that Reuven went ahead and he did it is not enough for him because somebody else would have been able to do that as well. Now, the Gemara goes on to its next Shiloh, which has a very similar discussion on our Mishnah, a very similar resolution. And that's the question of if Reuven is taking Truma from Shimon's things. For Shimon, if Reuven's taking Truma from Reuven's things for Shimon, that is, and here we're assuming where everybody's aware of it, and we're not talking about his Isser Hana. So the question is, who gets to decide who to give the Truma to, which is worth a little bit of money. You can actually pay somebody to give Truma to your relative. So who's the one who decides? Is it Reuven because he's the one taking the truma from his own things, or is it Shimon because it's being metaken his things? So the Gemara says this question was asked by Rabbi Yirmiyah to Rabbi Zera, and he responded that if you look at the pasuk carefully, it says we call it your tefillah when it's being separated. Obviously, then the decision as to who to give it to belongs to the one who still controls it, which is the owner of the fruits itself. So the Gemara says you have a proof from our Mishnah otherwise. Our Mishnah, obviously, as we said, is talking about a case we've proven where it's got to be that the person who's taking the truma was using his own things. Otherwise, he doesn't have a right to take the other person's truma without informing him. And it's got to be that he's not informing him, or he would be giving him hana, which he's not allowed to do. And so it's his own things. And you got to say that he's keeping the decision as to who to give it to himself. Because if he's giving that to the other guy, to Shimon, then he's giving Shimon a hana by allowing him to decide who gets his fruits. So the Gemara therefore gives the same answer we said before. The Gemara says, no, it's not talking about where Shimon was using his things to give to be metaken Reuven's produce. It's talking about where Reuven's produce was being used, and he indicated that he wants it by making an announcement. Whoever wants should come and do it, and therefore it's not Reuven's produce that are involved at all. And the fact that he gets to have the hana of deciding who's the one to get it, that's a result of his own produce, and Reuven's not giving him anything, especially since anybody else could have come and done that as well. The Gemara resolves this question by bringing an explicit statement of Rabbi Vo in the name of Yechanan. So 3 halachas. He said the only person who can do pidyon, who can redeem something, and has to add a fifth is the makdish himself. Anybody else who redeems something that somebody else was makdish does not have to add a fifth, does not have to add chomish. Second halacha, he said, is that if you have a situation where somebody's chayav a carbon and somebody else is makdish a carbon for him, the only one who can switch the kedusha to a different animal through a process called tamura, which is aser, it makes them both actually kadosh. That's the miskaper, the one who is chayav the carbon, not the one who is makdish the animal in the first place. And somebody who takes truma on somebody else's things, the decision as to who gets the truma goes to the one who is actually separating truma, not to the one who's having his truma metoken. Briefly now, the Gemara goes to the next line of the Mishnah, where we saw that if you're usher to give a nut to someone, you are not allowed to teach him mikra, you're not allowed to teach him psukim, but you are allowed to teach him medrash. The Gemara asks why. It's a hana both ways. The Gemara answers, we're talking about a situation where you pay for mikra and you don't pay for medrash. Now the Gemara wants to know, why would I pay for mikra and not for medrash? Why doesn't he say the other way around? Why should we assume that mikra is the one you pay for or not a medrash? The Gemara will discuss that more in detail on the next daf.